We at the Adams National Historical Park, a unit of the National Park System, are excited to welcome you to our virtual exhibit, America's First Father and Son Presidents. This presentation highlights the Adamses, a presidential family who occupied their home for an unprecedented 4 generations, over 140 years, and provides you an in-depth look at original art and artifacts that the Adams family so generously gave to the American people in 1946. All of these objects tell the story of this extraordinary family's legacy to America. So please, join us in experiencing the majesty of the Adams homes from the comfort of yours. We look forward to providing future virtual programming to commemorate and celebrate historical events, to feature the cultural and natural resources within the Adams National Historical Park as a historic house museum located in Quincy, Massachusetts, the City of Presidents, and to serve as an important educational resource for our community and for this country. Stay tuned and enjoy.
Adams National Historical Park is the only park where the story of 2 presidents, from birth to final resting place, can be told. Equally significant are the objects and stories associated with 2 First Ladies who are recognized as writers, mothers, partners, stateswomen, and educators. Built in 1731, this home occupied 4 generations of the Adams family from 1788 to 1927. Each generation added its own unique layer of history. President John Adams and First Lady Abigail Adams. Second generation, President John Quincy Adams and First Lady Louisa Catherine Adams. Third generation, Civil War Minister to Great Britain Charles Francis Adams and wife Abigail Brooks Adams. And fourth generation, literary historians Henry and Brooks Adams. John Adams was born in the house on the right, and John Quincy was born in the house on the left. John worked hard with his father on the farm, enjoyed going to school, fishing, and flying kites. He described his father as honest and active in church and town business. His mother came from a prominent Boston family. These 2 cottages are the oldest presidential birthplaces in the United States. They are situated 75 yards apart. Only about an acre exists today from the 140 acres of farmland and wilderness John and John Quincy grew up on. John's father instilled hard work and an interest in public affairs. His mother introduced him to the customs and lifestyles of the elites of colonial Boston. Upon his father's death, John inherited the small saltbox cottage adjacent to his birthplace. That is where he and Abigail lived upon their marriage. The house known as John Quincy's birthplace was built in 1663 and was purchased by John's father to expand his land. John set up his law office with a separate door so he could work at home. Besides preparing for legal cases in this room, he drafted the Constitution of Massachusetts in 1779. This copper warming pan is inscribed with her wedding date, Abigail Adams, 25th October, 1764. Abigail came from deep-rooted New England families. Her mother was Elizabeth Quincy, and her father, William Smith. A congregational clergy were known for their caring ministry in the community. John's law practice and then his involvement in politics took him away from home frequently. Abigail supervised the children's education, oversaw farm operations and the household in his absence. She kept him informed through letters, and he instructed her through his. In 1774, John was appointed one of the representatives from Massachusetts to the First Continental Congress. He helped write letters of protest to Great Britain. While separated from his family, he continued to instruct Abigail to educate the children.
Cultivate their minds, inspire their little hearts, and raise their wishes. Fix their attention on great and glorious objects. Sort out every little thing, and weed out every meanness.
John Quincy Adams was profoundly influenced by his upbringing in a small farmhouse. As son of John and Abigail Adams, he was also a son of the American Revolution. He would serve his country as minister to foreign nations, senator, secretary of state, the 6th president of the United States, and a congressman. One can only surmise Abigail was thinking of her daughter Nabby's future when she wrote John to
remember the ladies
when he was influencing our country's independence. In August of 1776, Abigail wrote to John,
I most sincerely wish that some more liberal plan might be laid and executed for the benefit of the rising generation, and that our new Constitution may be distinguished for learning and virtue. If we mean to have heroes, statesmen, and philosophers, we should have learned women. The world perhaps would laugh at me and accuse me of vanity, but you, I know, have a mind too enlarged and liberal to disregard the sentiment. If much depends, as is allowed, upon the early education of youth and the first principles which are instilled take the deepest root, great benefit must arise from literary accomplishments in women.
In November 1777, Congress elected John Adams commissioner to France. He traveled between France and the Netherlands trying to secure badly needed loans for Congress. An allegorical figure of a woman looking towards the sea, with inscribed shield, I yield whatever is right. John gave this locket to Abigail on his departure for Europe in 1779. John and Abigail were separated for over 10 years of their marriage. Abigail became known as a patriot on the home front. Often, the militia and citizens fleeing Boston would take refuge on their property. Abigail would feed them and provide supplies when able. Abigail made several requests for John to ship blue and white while he was at The Hague. She would sometimes trade the Chinese export porcelain for necessary household goods. John wrote to Abigail in May 1780.
The science of government it is my duty to study, more than all other sciences. The arts of legislation and administration and negotiation ought to take the place of, indeed exclude, in a manner, all other arts. I must study politics and war, that our sons may have liberty to study mathematics and philosophy. Our sons ought to study mathematics and philosophy, geography, natural history, and naval architecture, navigation, commerce, and agriculture, in order to give their children a right to study painting, poetry, music, architecture, statuary, tapestry, and porcelain.
John was asked by Congress to negotiate the terms of a peace agreement with Great Britain, which would mark the end of the American Revolution. The treaty was signed on September 3, 1783. John Singleton Copley captured John at his finest moment. Abigail and Nabby could finally join John and John Quincy in Europe. This copy of the Copley hangs in the Old House. John purchased this home in 1787 while serving as our first minister plenipotentiary to Great Britain. John thought he would retire to farming. He was soon called upon to be vice president. Oil portrait of George Washington by Edward Savage, 1790. Tuesday, 6th. Sat for Mr. Savage at the request of the vice president to have my portrait drawn for him. Portrait of President John Adams, painted by Jane Stewart's copy of her father's work, oil on canvas, original portrait circa 1800s. As president, he kept the country at peace when many were calling for war with France. Adams later described his peace decision as
the most splendid diamond in my crown.
Abigail Adams was first mother of one president and wife of another. She was our first Lady to live in the White House. Her letters to various family members were filled with advice, opinions, and compassion. She depended on writing to communicate with John, who was frequently separated from his family due to his commitment to public service. John Adams' stand-up writing desk. When the lid is raised, there are pigeonholes all the way across the desk for filing papers. John used this desk in Quincy when he was Vice President and President of the United States. An interesting feature is that only one pigeonhole was assigned the Army and Navy papers. Abigail Adams wrote to her sister, Mary Cranch, that she wished her looking glass packed and shipped to New York. She mentioned that the glass would look well in New York since the house there had rooms at least 11 feet high. John and Abigail owned this pair of George III mahogany knife boxes. They were the first inhabitants of the Executive Mansion and hosted a public reception on New Year's Day, 1801. English-cut glass candelabra has teardrop prisms and glass garlands. These elegant decorative arts are an example of the objects John and Abigail were able to purchase while they lived abroad. 18th century fire screens, hand-painted on satin with central picture of seated girl outlined with pearls. They belonged to Abigail and were mentioned in her letters. Louis XVI secretary. John Adams purchased this secretary to furnish his diplomatic residence in Holland. He sent numerous long letters to friends and family describing European affairs and observed the French court and national life. John sacrificed his career as a lawyer, family happiness, and security for our independence. August 30th, 1823, Jefferson wrote to James Madison,
I will say for Mr. Adams that he supported the Declaration with zeal and ability, fighting fearlessly for every word of it.
John Quincy Adams, after original by John Singleton Copley, oil on canvas, circa 1796. The original painting by Copley was painted as a gift to Abigail Adams from the artist and his wife. In 1784, John wrote to his son from The Hague,
I want you here as a secretary, as a companion, and as a pupil.
First Lady to John Quincy Adams, 6th President of the United States. Louisa Catherine Adams was born in London, England on February 12, 1775. Her mother was British, and her father a merchant from Maryland. She was educated in the arts, fluent in French, and wrote poetry and theatrical productions for her family. While serving as the minister to Russia, John Quincy was called upon to negotiate an end of the War of 1812. The Treaty of Ghent was signed December 24, 1814, that ended the war. John Quincy bid his wife to close up their home and meet him in Paris. She began one of the most extraordinary adventures of her life. On her 40th birthday, February 12, 1815, Louisa and her youngest son began the 40-day perilous journey from St. Petersburg to Paris to reunite with John Quincy Adams. She may have purchased this amber glass at Königsberg en route. John Quincy Adams purchased these statues in Paris. He referred to them as household gods. They are Cicero, Homer, Plato, Virgil, Socrates, and Demosthenes. John Quincy Adams not only read Cicero, but he translated the orations as well. Sculptor, thy hand has molded into form the haggard features of a toil-worn face, and whosoever views thy work shall trace an age of sorrow and a life of storm. And canst thou mold the heart? For that is warm, glowing with tenderness for all its race. To Hiram Powers, written by John Quincy Adams. Powers and Adams shared the same abhorrence of slavery. John Quincy inherited the property known as Peacefield upon his father's death.
That moment was inexpressibly painful and struck me as if it had been an arrow to the heart. My mother and father have departed. The charm which has always made this house to me an abode of enchantment is dissolved, and yet my attachment to it and to the whole region round is stronger than I have ever felt it before.
John Quincy Adams' Diary, 13 July, 1826. Louisa Catherine wrote of her father-in-law,
"Among all the great characters that has been my lot to meet, I have never met with a mind of such varied powers, such acute discrimination, and which was so intrinsically sound, with a memory so fertile, so clear, so perspicuous. Everything in his mind was rich, racy, and true."
In The Education of Henry Adams, Henry describes this tea service in his account of his early memories in Quincy and of his grandmother, Louisa Catherine.
Sitting in her paneled room at breakfast with her heavy silver teapot and sugar bowl and cream jug. To the boy, she seemed singularly peaceful, a vision of silver gray, presiding over her old president and her Queen Anne mahogany.
Louisa proved to be a significant asset to John Quincy in diplomatic circles and foreign courts. She was fluent in French, loved to dance, and was often the charming contrast to her stern husband. Right after John Quincy was appointed minister to Berlin by his father, President John Adams, they married in London on July 26, 1797. The sewing box, in the shape of a harpsichord with brass decoration, is also a music box. It is lined with white velvet with a place for fittings. Louisa probably purchased this in France after being reunited with John Quincy. Describing his grandmother Louisa in The Education of Henry Adams, he wrote,
"The madam was a little more remote than the president, but more decorative. She stayed much in her own room with the Dutch tiles, looking out on her garden with the box walks, and seemed a fragile creature to a boy who sometimes brought her a note or a message, and took distinct pleasure in looking at her delicate face under what seemed to him very becoming caps. He liked her refined figure, her gentle voice and manner, her vague effect of not belonging there, but to Washington or to Europe, like her furniture and writing desk with little glass doors above and little 18th century volumes in old binding labeled Peregrine Pickle or Tom Jones or Hannah More. Try as she might, the madam could never be Bostonian, and it was her cross in life, but to the boy, it was her charm."
American embroidered memorial wreath presented to Louisa Catherine Adams upon the death of her father-in-law, John Adams. Red, white, and blue silk embroidered flowers create a wreath of color on a black silk background. The lettering in the center of the wreath reads, "Presented to Mrs. Adams, Lady of the President of the United States of America, by the pupils of the Seminary for Female Education at Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, 1826 A.D." The piece is an extraordinary example of 19th century American art. It honors the contributions of Adams' women It was presented to the First Lady during John Quincy Adams' presidency, signifying the father-son presidential connection. As a member of the Continental Congress, John Adams visited the Seminary for Female Education and witnessed for himself their fine embroidery skills. John wrote to his daughter about his visit to the school and noted it was a
remarkable institution for the education of young ladies.
Brilliantly, the symbolic colors of the wreath highlight the date, July 4th, 1826, when John Adams died. The park provides an extraordinary window into the personal lives of two presidential families, early American literature, education, and intellectual life, and the formation of our nation's government.